In this lesson, we're going to talk about bone structure and the growth structure and classification of bone and kind of about the skeleton. So when we talk about the structure of the skeleton, we look at the two different types. You've got the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton consists of the skull, the vertebral column, and the rib cage, while the appendicular skeleton consists of limbs, the pelvic girdle, and the shoulder girdle. When we start talking about bone classifications, what we're going to talk about are the different types of bones that you're going to see throughout the body. So the first one we have is the long bone, and this is going to be found in the appendicular skeleton. So you're going to have things like the humerus, the radius, the ulna, femur, tibia, fibula, metacarpals, and metatarsals. And then there's another classification called short bones, and these are going to be the carpals and tarsals. So these are the bones found in the wrists or the ankles. And then you have flat bones. So flat bones are going to be bones that are pretty much flat. So they're going to be certain bones of the skull. You also have flat bones of the scapula, the sternum, and the ribs. And then there's these irregular bones. Irregular bones are like pelvic bones, vertebra, sacrum, and bones in the coccyx. Then there's also different types of skull bones that are irregular. So this is like the ethmoid or sphenoid bone. And then there's also like the maxilla and mandible. These are all irregular bones. Then you have another classification of bones called sesamoid bones. And these are bones that are encased by tendon, and they are essentially floating bones. But the one that is most often referred to is the patella. When you talk about the bone, we're looking at the structure of the long bone. And this is what you typically think of when you think about a bone. I'm going to draw my rudimentary bone here. So you have some important sections of it. You have the diaphysis, which is the middle shaft of the bone, and then you have the epiphysis, which is on both ends of it. The diaphysis is hollow, and it contains bone marrow called the medullary cavity. It also contains the osteoblasts, which are responsible for building up bone tissue. In the epiphysis, you have this thin layer of compact bone on the outside, but then you also have all the trabecular and spongy bone kind of in the middle. There's no area there's no medullary cavity on the epiphysis. So the epiphysis is just trabecular bone on the inside. The other important part about the epiphysis is that it has the articular cartilage, and that happens on the outside. And the reason it happens on the outside is articular cartilage does a couple of things. The first thing is that it happens at joints, and the reason it happens at joints is because it wants to help reduce friction. And the other thing about articular cartilage is it comes from hyaline cartilage. And there's another important structure of the long bone that we want to talk about, and it's called the periosteum, and it covers the outside of bones, and it's made of this stuff called the white fibrous connective tissue, and you may see me abbreviate it as WFTC, but what it is it's a connective tissue, and it allows for the attachment of tendons and ligaments to occur, and it happens like you'll have a muscle that comes off here. Well, it's going to attach here and not necessarily here because you have articular cartilage that comes around, or that the articular cartilage is kind of on the edge of the epiphysis. And none of the white fibrous connective tissue will attach to those there. But the periosteum contains blood and lymph vessels, and it also contains nerves. The other thing that the periosteum does is it actually has osteoblasts, which are really helpful for growth and repair along these collagen fibers. But when we're talking about other types of bones, so you're looking at your short, irregular, and sesamoid bones, the composition is essentially the same throughout all of these. You have a bone on the outside, you have the internal spongy trabecular component of bone, and then you have the external bone. So you've got that compact bone that's covered by the periosteum, and that helps to make that bone hard. Now that you have a better understanding of what's involved with all the different types of bones, let's look at how these two different types of bones work together in a single unit. So if we look at this cross section here, you've got this central cavity here, which has the trabecular bone or the spongy bone, and that's the bone marrow cavity. And then the endosteum actually is right in here, and it covers that trabecular bone. Towards the outside of the bone, what you've got is the compact bone. You can see this layer right in here, and that's that hard surface. Now, What's important to notice here is, so I'm going to draw this guy right over here. So this is your osteon. And remember, osteons are cylinders of multiple osteocytes. So you've got all your osteocytes, which go in concentric circles all the way around. And this concentric circle is called a lacuna. And what we want to remember here is that throughout the osteon, you have, and you can see it kind of here, you've got this Haversian canal. And the Haversian canal goes up and down, and it houses your blood vessels, and it also houses your nerves. And as we think about, okay, well, all the osteocytes on the outside, not next to the Haversian canal, need to get blood. How do we do that? Well, if we go back and remember the other lesson, is that we do it through these traversing blood vessels called canaliculi. But the all the blood vessels inside the Haversian canal need to talk to each other as well. And we need to, it can't just go up and down all the time. Well, the way this happens is with the Volkmann's canal, which goes, so you can see here, Haversian canals go up and down, and then the Volkmann's canal goes sideways. Another really important thing to think about when we're looking at compact bone are the different types of lamella, so different types of tissue. So you've got this interstitial tissue. So I'm going to draw this kind of right around here. You can kind of see the edge of the osteon, which is right here, which would look something like this. And then you've got another osteon right around here, and then you've got another osteon. Well, they're circular and cylindrical, but so they don't quite touch each other, and they wouldn't just be empty holes. Well, you have this interstitial lamella, which basically fills these gaps. And then on the outside on the outer edge of cells, you have this circumferential lamella. So over here, these are all circular cells. Well, you got to have something to fill those gaps as well. That's your circumferential lamella. Well, the point of these other types of lamella is that they provide strength throughout the bone, and it helps to reinforce the bone itself and provide that strength and structure. Okay, so let's recap. When we're talking about bones, we look at the different types of classifications. You've got long bone, short bone, flat bone, irregular, and sesamoid bones. Remember that when you're talking about AMP, you always want to think about structures. So when you're looking at the structure of the bone, remember you have the diaphysis, which is the middle, and then you have the epiphysis or the epiphyses, which are on the outside, and then you have the periosteum, and that's the covering that goes on the outside, minus articular cartilage. Remember, when we're talking about bone composition, that bones are both made up of both spongy and compact bone, and they have their functions. And then when we're talking about blood, remember, we want to get blood to the bone. So how do we do this? Well, when we're going up and down, we look at the Haversian canals. And then if we want to go side to side, the Haversian canals are going to talk because you've got your Volkmann's canals. So this is your Haversian, and then this is your Volkmann's canals. And then you've got your lamellar structure. So these are the supportive intercellular tissues that help to provide strength. You've got the interstitial, which actually goes in between all the osteons, and then you've got the circumferential, which goes around. So that's it for our lesson on bone structure. Make sure you check out all the resources attached to this lesson. Now go out and be your best selves today, and as always, happy nursing.